Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Things We Fear. I'm your host, William Schmidt, and join me today as we talk about strange funeral rites throughout history. Tana Toraja. In Tana Toraja, in eastern Indonesia, funerals are raucous affairs involving the whole village. They can last anywhere from days to weeks. Families will save up for long periods of time to raise the resources for a lavish funeral, where the sacrificial water buffalo will carry the deceased soul into the afterlife. Until that moment, which can take place years after physical death, the dead relative is referred to simply as a person who is sick, or even one who is asleep. They are laid down in special rooms in the family home, where they are symbolically fed, cared for, and taken out, very much still a part of their relatives' lives. Number 2. Endo cannibalism. For some cultures, the best way to honor the dead is by eating them. Referred to as endo cannibalism, these feasts of the dead are a way to forge a permanent connection between the living and the recently deceased. Cultures who engaged in endo-cannibalism included the Melanesians of Papua New Guinea and the Wari people of Brazil. Number 3. Ritual dissection, or sky burial. But why nourish yourself with the flesh of the recently deceased when you can use it to feed wild animals? Such is the thinking behind the Tibetan Buddhists' practice of ritual dissection. Bodies of the deceased are cut up and left out for wild animals to feed on. Buddhists have no desire to preserve or commemorate a dead body, something that is seen as no more than an empty vessel. Moreover, in tune with their respect for all life, Buddhists see it as only fitting that one's final act is to have their remains used to sustain the life of another living creature, and in fact, the ritual is seen as a gesture of compassion and charity. Number 4. Hanging coffins. The mysterious Bo people of southwest China's Gongxian Valley flourished for a millennia before they were massacred by the Ming Dynasty over 5 centuries ago. Today, the Bo are almost completely forgotten, save for the dramatic hanging coffins they left behind. A haunting array of wooden caskets that extend from the rock face to a height of almost 300 feet. Located just above a crab stream, the 160 coffins were placed along the cliffs and within natural caves, with some resting on wooden posts that extended out from the cliffside. Now sadly, due to grave robbers and defacers, much of these remains are gone. The area was deemed a historical culture site and is now protected by the Chinese government. Number 5. Sati. Though now mercifully banned in India, Sati was a funerary practice in which recently widowed women immolated themselves on their husband's funeral pyre. The custom was seen as a voluntary act, but there are many instances in where women were forced to commit sati. No one is certain how the ritual got started, but one suggestion is that it was introduced to prevent wives from killing their wealthy husbands and running off with their lovers. Interestingly, India was not the first in old culture to adopt this tradition. Other ancient societies that practiced something similar to sati included the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Goths, and the Scythians. Number 6. Viking funerals. Hindi women clearly had it rough, but so did the slave girls of Viking noblemen. According to the historic account of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a 10th century Arab writer, the ritual following the death of a chieftain was exceptionally brutal. Once dead, a chieftain's body was put into a temporary grave for 10 days, while new clothes were being prepared for him. During this time, one of his slave girls would be volunteered to join him in the afterlife. She was then guarded day and night and given copious amounts of alcohol. Once the cremation ritual got started, The girl went from tent to tent being raped by every man in the village. As the men were having sex with her, they would say, "Tell your master that I did this because of my love for him." Following this, the girl was then taken to a tent where she was then raped by an additional 6 Viking men, was strangled to death with a rope, and finally stabbed by a village matriarch. And for the coup de grace, the bodies of the chieftain and the slave girl were placed on board a wooden ship that was then set alight. The Vikings did this to ensure that the slave girl would serve her master even in the afterlife, while the sexual rites were a way to transform the chieftain's life force. Ritual finger amputation. As if the death of a loved one isn't enough, at number 7 we have ritual finger amputation. The Dani people of Papua New Guinea had to cut off their own fingers. This severe and incomprehensible ritual applied to any woman related to the deceased as well as any children. This was done to satisfy and drive away the spirits of the deceased. It was also used as a way to use pain in expression of sorrow and suffering. The wife of the deceased had her fingers tied with a string and then struck off with an axe. The leftover pieces were dried and burned or stored in a special place. The ritual is no longer practiced today. Number 8. Samadhi Hana. The Malagasy people of Madagascar have clearly never heard the phrase, "rest in peace." In an effort to hasten decomposition, the Malagasy dug up the remains of their dead loved ones, wrapped them in new clothes, and then danced with the corpses around the tomb to live music. Called Samadhi Hana, or the turning of the bones, this ritual is believed to be essential for ushering their loved ones into the afterlife. This ritual was then practiced for 3 centuries, despite the efforts of local Christian churches to stamp it out for good. Number 9. Mortuary totem poles. Totem poles are a fixture of the American Northwest and the Haida people, but there's more to these icons than meets the eye. Normally the remains of a deceased Haida were thrown into a mass pit where they were scavenged by animals, but the series of events following the death of a chief, shaman, or warrior were considerably more intricate. In those cases, the body would be crushed to a pulp with wooden clubs so that it could fit into a small wooden box the size of a suitcase. Following that, the box would then be placed atop a special mortuary totem pole in front of the deceased longhouse, where the icons acted as guardians for the spirit's journey to the afterlife. Visiting missionaries were often taken aback by the practice, mostly on account of the lingering smell. Finally, at number 10, we have the Zoroastrian Funeral. Zoroastrians have a thing with dead bodies. What they see is something that defiles everything it touches, whether it be the ground, clothes, people, and even fire. The funeral gets off to a rousing start by having the corpse cleaned in unconsecrated bull's urine, which can only be done by a specially trained member of the community. Once cleaned, the corpse is laid in linen and visited twice by the Sagdeed, a dog which can cast away evil spirits. After mourners visit the corpse, it is placed on top of the Dachma, or the Tower of Silence, where the Zoroastrians remove the clothes using tools. The body is then left out to be devoured by vultures. The entire ritual is done this way to ensure the minimal amount of harm and injury to the living.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. If you liked it, please subscribe and hit the icon next to the subscribe button so you can get notifications anytime I upload a new video. Join us next time as we continue to ask the question, what do you fear?